We are going to break away from President Trump's statements there. It is 10:42 a.m. He's been talking now for about 11 or so minutes. We're going to monitor that announcement, that statement that he is making there. He's obviously celebrating the jobs report number. He's also going off on a bit of a tangent, talking about all kinds of other issues and politicizing some of it. He talked a lot about the jobs numbers. He talked about the coronavirus, the pandemic, talking about testing. We're going to dig into all of that, but we're going to keep an eye on that press conference and see if he actually does take any questions. He has not yet taken questions in some of the more recent events he has held there. If he does, we will watch that. We'll bring that to you. But as of now, he's just talking there. So we're going to bring in our team of reporters to do a little fact checking with the president, help us make sense of what we're hearing throughout the course of this morning with the numbers and the president. Let's start with NBC News senior business correspondent and MSNBC anchor Stephanie Ruhle. Shannon Pettypiece is also with us. She's at the White House, and Seth Harris, who served as labor secretary in the Obama administration. Stephanie, first of all, you heard a little bit of the president there touting the jobs report numbers, saying that it was obviously much better than expected. He also repeats this falsehood that we had the greatest economy in the world, in the history of the world. We know that is not accurate, but break down a little bit your impressions of what you heard this morning.
Okay, let's talk about what the president just said. The president right there was just knocking Warren Buffett's investment record. He said Warren Buffett, probably the greatest living American investor. He said Warren Buffett sold airline stocks recently. He's made a lot of good investments, but, that may have been a very big mistake. Let's make something clear. The president of the United States, as a businessman, filed for bankruptcy over 4 times versus Warren Buffett, one of the greatest living investors. What did we see in the month of May? A 48% rise in bankruptcies in this country. So on one hand, yes, the president could walk out there and say this is some positive news. When we first had state closures, we saw massive layoffs. And now, as time is passing and the 50 states are starting to reopen, we're starting to see some light on the other side. That's natural. But to say this is more than a V shape, it's a rocket ship, that's absolute nonsense. I'm standing here in Philadelphia, a city filled with people that are currently unemployed, temporarily laid off. So it's crazy to say we're coming back like a rocket ship. And don't forget all of the businesses out there that even as they reopen, once the precautions are put in place, their businesses are impaired. The CEO of Boeing recently said the impact of corona is apocalyptic. So yes, people want to get back out there, but we don't know if businesses will be booming or profitable again. And I want to make one other point. The PPP loans, we talked a ton about it. We saw them go into effect in the last month. That is a $600 billion loan program, forgivable loans. And they are forgivable, assuming business owners hire back all of their employees. To get these loans forgivable, you have to have 100% employment. So we saw a lot of people hired back. Is that going to translate into these businesses being viable, be able to stay open? I'll talk to you in September. We'll see.
In fact, we will see. Stephanie will stay with me. So that was the quick perspective on the number. Shannon, I want to get your perspective on something the president going off on a tangent about, again, repeating a lot of the falsehoods when he was talking about COVID-19, at one time even saying it was a gift from China to Europe. He also touted that the U.S. has the largest number of testing in the world. That is also incorrect per capita. It does not have the largest number in the world, and saying that the U.S. saved possibly millions of lives. This is the same president who said that he was expecting the number to be about 60,000 deaths. We have surpassed that. We are now at 105,000 deaths. That number still climbing, could even climb more as a result of what we've seen over the past couple of days. So the president using this opportunity to try and spin what has happened with the pandemic as a victory.
Yeah, Ayman, and it was really just a continuation of the talking points we have been hearing from him for a while. He took some jabs at Democrats, used this as an opportunity to bring up the Green New Deal, talking about how the economy would be doing even better now if people weren't worried about Democrats getting elected in November. But it raises a bigger question that we're all probably wondering, why is the president doing this? Of course, he wants to be touting and bringing attention to these job numbers today. In his coronavirus response, he's, after this, heading to a swab plant in Maine campaign. But he's had a pattern now of holding these impromptu Friday afternoon, what he calls news conferences, many where he does not take questions. I think a big thing to watch for is whether he does take questions, because I was told yesterday by a senior administration official, which goes to tell you how much anything ever goes as planned here, but that the plan was not to have the president speaking publicly, substantively, until they had more to say on the George Floyd issue and anything they can do to respond to this broader issue of police reforms or social justice reforms, which has been at the heart of these protests, and the White House really hasn't talked to, and they know that is going to be the big question. My colleague Peter Alexander, who's in the Rose Garden right now, I know if he gets a chance to ask the questions, that's one of the things he's going to be talking to. And as of yesterday, they didn't really have a response to what the administration was going to do to address these underlying issues that have driven all the demonstrations across the country. So obviously, the president wants to tout these economic numbers. He wants to get out there and talk about these broader issues and talking points and defend his response to the coronavirus pandemic, but adds to the big underlying issue of the protests. They don't expect to have a really good answer there, at least as of yesterday.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Shannon, really quickly, while we were kind of pulling out on that wide shot, you can clearly see that social distancing is not being practiced there in the way the White House set up the chairs for the press pool. Even those standing behind the president don't look like they're socially distancing themselves. Very much, we are still in a pandemic. We should not lose sight of that. Let me bring in Seth Harris here. Seth, give me your impression of what you heard the president tout in terms of the number, because there is this, as Stephanie was saying, this could be a bit of a false sense of optimism, given that we're still very much in a pandemic and that the PPP kicked in, and that could have been a factor in getting these job numbers up.
I think it's very likely that that's what happened, Ayman. What we saw was about 2.5 million people who had been temporarily furloughed, temporarily laid off, brought back to work, which is a very good thing because it means that there's business activity. Those people are going to get back on payrolls, get their paychecks, and they'll be able to spend in their communities. That's only about 11% of the total number of jobs that we lost over the last 3 months. So it's certainly not a rocket ship. It's just the beginning. It's probably not a V-shaped recovery. It's going to take several more months in order for us to recover and also to get those permanently unemployed people, those permanently furloughed people back to work. And let me just say, since people are in the streets talking about race and racial disparities and racial violence, violence by police against African Americans, I think we should point out that in this report, we see racial disparities. The unemployment rate for white people went down. The unemployment rate for African Americans went up. And that's even though the industries in which we have high percentages of African Americans, Latinos, and others are coming back, still African Americans are left behind. So it's not just police violence that we need to deal with. We need to deal with economic inequality in our society, racism in the labor market and in workplaces. This is a pervasive problem, and we need to get in the streets and march about it.
Yes, that is a very important point, and thank you very much for flagging that for us as we discussed earlier. I appreciate that. Stephanie, let me ask you your thoughts about... Listen, go ahead, Stephanie. Go ahead. I see you want to jump in. Go ahead.
I would just add to Seth's point, it's really important because African-American unemployment going up above 16%, but specifically black women in America, almost 20% of them lost work between February and May. Why do we explain this? Because those are jobs that are low-wage service worker jobs. So the issue that Seth mentions about the social unrest, it takes you back to economic inequality and opportunity inequality, education inequality. Black people do not have, in large portions, the white-collar job opportunities where they can be working from home, benefiting from the booming stock market. So this is an opportunity to shine a light on that and say, if we're focused on policy reform, then let's take a hard look at education and career opportunities.
Yeah, Stephanie, I was just going to say really quickly, actually, I was just in Philadelphia earlier this week, and one of the points that almost every official I spoke to and almost every activist I spoke to on the ground protester cited to me was that Philadelphia is a city that is majority black, and yet only 2.6% of businesses owned in that city are black owned. So obviously we have a long way to go to make sure economic equality, as Seth was talking about, actually gets materialized on the ground. Thank you all for joining us.